live on LinkedIn, some YouTube channels. We're in a very variety of places. And for those of you who don't know, I am Chris Lockhart, and I'm joined here by Oliver Cronk. We have our names down there at the bottom, right? You can have there's Oliver's over there, and yeah, somewhere. I think I have it mirrored. But so why are we doing this? Well, both of us, we host this podcast with some other friends, Phil Yanoff and Wendy Keene, and that podcast is called Consultants Saying Things. It's been going on for, I think we're in season 5 now. I think we're approaching like 60 different like hour-long episodes where we talk about all kinds of things that consultants normally might be interested in. And the focus of that podcast, right, is meant to be like evergreen topics. Like, in fact, I think our number one episode, I think, is from season 1 about design thinking, right? So, this is kind of this, let's focus on evergreen topics that people can use over time, and not just focus on the trendy topic that's in the news this week, but that nobody cares about 3 weeks from now. That being said, I think there is this need, right, for Oliver, for us to maybe comment a need.
Yeah,
maybe I'm overstating it.
We want to jump on the hype. We want to jump on the hype bandwagon, right?
So we want to jump on the hype bandwagon. There's cool things that we should talk about, right?
Yeah. We feel the need to talk about something.
There's some stuff we're talking about on the side channels. Take it away.
So,
what are some of the things we're talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, look, so I think we've got some interesting, it's a little bit meta to talk about social media while we're on social media, but we've got quite a lot of content in that respect, haven't we? We did actually, following off the back of the episode that went down really well on public speaking. If people haven't seen that, by the way, if you're a regular CST viewer, or if you're not, if you're new to that one, is definitely an episode to go and check out, the public speaking.
Let's just say everyone should watch that. Everyone should.
Okay, fine. But then that naturally sort of led us to sort of social media, because it's just a different form of showing up in public, right? It's just online. And then we felt the need, a bit like when we did the mental health one for consultants, we got an expert in this following episode, and we're going to do the same for social media, right? We've got an expert on LinkedIn lined up.
So for those who don't know, we had an episode, I think, back over the summer on mental health for consultants, right? How do you maintain, how do you not get burnt out, right? All that stuff. And then we kind of realized, like, hey, we're not medical professionals. Right. We should probably have, first of all, a disclaimer, right? Don't just follow our advice, right? But also we should probably have some experts. And so I think the same, to your point, right? Social media. Yes, we use it, but are we experts at it? And the answer is no, right? So coming up, we're going to be having sort of a marquee episode. Would you call it? It's a big one, right? I mean, this is a leading global expert in using social media to advance your career.
Yeah. Let's hope he turns up for the recording anyway.
Yeah, and stays, right?
and allows us to put the episode out. He doesn't say, no, that was right, terrible.
Yeah.
That's not
awful. I don't like
it. Interestingly, actually, this week, I actually attended a social media course, just like an evening talk, actually. Yeah. And it was more consumer focused, but it was fascinating. The things like, kind of how crazy TikTok has got now. Like the one thing, I don't know if you heard about this, Chris, but in China, the TikTok algorithm is different. So if you're under a certain age, TikTok will only serve Chinese kids educational content.
That's interesting.
And it also restricts the amount of time they can spend on it as well. And the stats are mind-blowing. Like, on average, people are spending more time on social media a day than the duration of the film The Matrix. So the Matrix is not a short film, right? It's about 2 hours, 15 minutes. And apparently, on average, we're spending over 2.5 hours of our lives each day on social media. Now, maybe that's different for you and I, because we're older than the younger generation that's perhaps a little bit more hooked on this stuff. But it is addictive, and it was fascinating, the kind of do's and don'ts really on particularly consumer brand like kind of engagement. But there's definitely some lessons to be learned there from. So I'm going to be sort of mulling over some of those thoughts, because there's some lessons to be learned for business B2B type social media.
And you'd like to think that there are some social networks, like, so for example, like LinkedIn, where I know this is airing right now, right? Like LinkedIn, you would think is maybe, well, not maybe, is meant to be like more focused on professional and networking and connections and branding and all that sort of stuff. And yet, you also tend to see on LinkedIn some, shall we say, antisocial type, behavior, right?
Yeah.
The Facebook effect, right? The Facebook effect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think since Twitter's sort of had a bit of a wobble, you've seen perhaps an increase in content that maybe people would have previously posted to Twitter. But on this, back in 2019, when I was working for a big four consultancy, I felt the need to sort of help because I came into that environment as a sort of experienced hire, but a lot of people gone through the graduate sort of route and had only ever worked at that organization, and they felt like too scared to actually engage on. So they would be a passive reader, and I was like, no, no,
Mhm.
no. Lots of people should be putting their thought leadership and other thinking out there. And so I wrote a kind of very quick blog, but I did it in consultation with a few people, and kind of there's a number of angles in there, like sort of thinking about the IP either of the
Yeah.
client or the engagement you're on, and there's other things in there about sort of not oversharing, and there is definitely a piece in there about it isn't the place to sort of do humble brag and
Right.
hey, look at my watch.
I'm happy to announce that I've won the following award. You know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but beyond social media, there's some really interesting stuff going on with AI, and I feel like I think part of
Yeah.
the reason we wanted to get on is everyone is talking about GPT,
Everyone's
like
talking
Chat
about AI.
GPT, or before that GPT-3, and so I thought it was worth having a discussion because I think there's a lot of people getting very excited about the promise. I
Mm.
think there's some perils there as well that maybe we
Yeah.
should sort of highlight. And
Yeah.
I've been doing some digging. Like I'm working with some clients on this sort of area, so I've been doing quite a bit of research. So I thought it might be worth us sort of chatting about some of that stuff as well, right, Chris?
Yeah, and by the way, I think it totally fits in with I mean, what we were talking about with social media because I mean, I use LinkedIn, frankly, almost as a news source, right? And so I learned stuff, and I think yeah, I had heard of OpenAI and all this sort of stuff, but I hadn't seen sort of the output. It was LinkedIn where I think I first saw some of the hey, look at what you can do, right? And you're right. It's like wow, it's cool, it's really cool, but it's also fraught with some danger here, right?
So, so the interesting thing about this is that Chat GPT is simply a easier front end onto the GPT suite of stuff that OpenAI has been working on for a while. So I've been playing with and you still have to sign in. It's just when you signed in before, it was like a sandbox where you would have to work out what parameters of the model you wanted to put in. You didn't require coding. You could still put in sort of elaborate on this sentence or give me this as code or whatever. But it was like a step. They basically removed a step. You can just ask the damn thing, "Can you do
Mhm.
this?"
Yeah.
And actually, so this stuff isn't new. What's interesting about sort of perhaps slightly provide a bit of objectivity about sort of the user stats because they're saying I don't know it's the fastest thing to 5 million users
Saw
or
that.
something,
5 days to go to some
something like
number of
that.
users.
But
Yeah.
the reality is actually what they've done is the GPT-3 was already at that figure. It took a few
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
The reality is I think they're kind of being a little bit naughty because you already had that many users using GPT-3 anyway. You've just
Yeah.
made it incredibly easy to use GPT. So of course it's going to be faster to that many users because you already had that many users anyway, and you've just made it even more accessible.
So where do you see some of the applications of I mean, obviously, look, this can go in all kinds of different directions.
Mm.
Right? It's like, in the immediate future. Let's not talk about 5 years from now, right? Like
No.
in the immediate future, like what are some practical applications? 'Cause I'll give you one,
Yep.
right? I was doing some client work the other day and I was like, I wonder what this thing would have to say about this topic area. I asked it a question, right? And I got, I don't know, 6 paragraphs of content that I imagine was sourced maybe from internet sources or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
It was accurate. It wasn't groundbreaking. Didn't tell
Right.
me anything that wasn't
Yep.
there already, but it wrote the copy, right?
Yeah. So
Which
I'm the same. I've used it in that capacity as well. I'm in the midst of writing the tech strategy for Scott Logic. So like what technologies we'll work with clients on over the
Mhm.
next few years. And there was just like a terminology section at the end, and I'm like, why don't I just give
Yeah.
so I started writing half the sentence, and I just gave it to ChatGPT to sort of complete. And yeah, I had to, of course, correct English to be proper English rather than that sort of American strange variant. So I had to anglicize it. But I still think it requires human validation, right? Because it can create highly intelligible garbage, right?
Right.
So if you're
Right.
not, if you don't at least have some kind of basic understanding of the subject matter, it could get you in hot water, right? Because it
Right.
could spout out something that grammatically looks great, but actually is complete and utter garbage. So you still need to know, I think, at the moment, the subject matter space. And if you're going to build this into solutions, you need almost as smart a checking process to check what's coming out of the machine going to a customer or a client
Yeah.
isn't going to get you into hot water, like from an intellectual property perspective, from a compliance perspective. from a customer conduct perspective. So these are the angles that I'm very much working with clients on at the moment. Is yes, we could talk about a lot of different applications. Clearly, chatbots, it is a chatbot itself in its incarnation, but it's a chatbot that can kind of go in various different dimensions.
Yeah.
Where you take the stock technologies, then provide intents and various sort of nudges to it, so that it's more bounded and it will provide a more consistent response to sort of questions. Because you can ask the thing a question and it'll give you a different response every time you ask it. So
Right.
you kind of need a bit of consistency. So yeah, there's a bunch of applications. I think the bit that people aren't, it's wowing people because it can get things accurate enough that it impresses people. It's a bit like the DALL-E, the AI artist that OpenAI are also working on.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't have to get anything perfect because you had no preconception of how a drawing that involves salmon going down a river, which was the big thing that everyone was posting a few weeks ago. You've got no preconception what that is. So you're impressed if it sort of puts some reasonably realistic looking salmon going down a river, because that's mind blowing, right? That computer can kind of do that from what you've asked it to do. So the interesting thing about these generative AI algorithms and models is they can get things kind of good enough that they kind of wow you and go, yeah, that's great. But the devil is always, as always, is in the detail of, right, if I apply this to my particular business problem, how much trouble am I going to get in when it goes wrong?
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree, right? I mean, I think, you know, there's a couple things here, right? Which is like, you know, if you think back to when we talked about, you know, in previous years, it's like, oh, you know, we need to automate everything. Let's automate everything. We have RPA. We can do all these amazing things, and you know, whatever. Of course, if you didn't have a process that worked to begin with, right? Automating that process, you know, is sort of like, you know, does that even make sense, right? I've just sped up the thing that doesn't work, right? I've taken the human intervention out of something that wasn't working, right? And I've made it faster, right? So when I look at it like, through that lens, it's like, okay, great. You know, if I don't understand a topic, to your point, leveraging technology like this to educate me on the topic, I think is a bit dangerous, right? Because to your point, there's a lack of
And
consistency in how do you if
and
you're
you
a
and you come on
pharmacist,
to the
if you're a
you come on
pharmacist,
to the
you're
next.
asking
Sorry.
it formulary, right? Do you trust the damn thing?
Well, my next point was exactly going to be this, which is, um, you're ultimately, you can, by the way, ask it to provide citations and references. So that's an interesting
Yeah.
dimension, which by the way, I highly recommend people do that, because then at least you've got some things you can go click on and validate. Has this thing completely made a pig's ear of what's come out?
A pig's ear?
A pig's ear. That's an English expression for you.
Oh, Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle. Yeah. Tally ho.
Tell you.
Sorry, going back on point. So the thing that's worrying some people is this thing has ingested the whole of the internet. Of course, that's got biases, and some people are talking about this replacing Google search. So another application that people are talking about is,
Yeah.
why do I need to wade through pages of internet search results when actually most people don't go beyond page one anyway? Why can't I have something that just gives me the answer? And I think my suspicion in early 2023 is the smart assistants like Alexa and Cortana and all that sort of stuff, rather than going, oh, I don't know the answer to that one, Oliver, if they even address you by name. I can't remember if they do or not.
Do they
they'll
call you
actually-
Ollie? Do they call you Ollie?
I think I've told it to call me Ollie. I don't know. Maybe they'll default to something like this to go, hey, I had a chat with my friend ChatGPT. Hopefully it'll have a better name, because one of the things I have criticised is it's a bit of a geeky name. And they said, because this is what they think on this topic that you just asked. So they kind of almost provide a bit of a get out of jail free card for Amazon, that Amazon isn't all of a sudden saying that so-and-so is racist or whatever.
Right.
But the political, and I know we have to be a little bit careful when we get onto politics, you and I, but bear with me.
No, what are you talking about?
The political ramifications of this are huge, right? So, of course, you'll probably program it so that it would never answer who should I vote for in the general election or in the midterm or whatever.
Or ask it to fact check things, right?
But equally, it could sort of sway your thinking. Now, I know a lot of people have concerns about how biased big tech is, and if you think this is ingesting an awful lot of big tech data sources, if you are, you could look at this and be very worried about it, because it could be sort of providing partisan inadvertently, not necessarily maliciously.
It has to learn, right? It has to learn from something. You have to feed it information. And if the information, it's the whole thing about bias in AI, which I know is a big topic separate to this, but I mean, it's built in. If you are the one programming it, and that's one of the criticisms, by the way, like Wikipedia and some other things, right? Is like the biases of the people that are creating these things are built into it. And if you and this is where I think it comes down to, right, is why would I use Google when I have this? Well, the reason I would use Google is because I know the context, right? And I know the context in my head. The AI does not know the context. And maybe in 5 or 10 years it will, and it will be indistinguishable from the human brain. But for now, it doesn't know the context. I do.
No,
So I can filter it through.
it's mimicking, right? So
Yeah,
I've done
correct.
some reading about what it is, and these
Yeah,
large language models are essentially mimics.
yeah,
So they are taking so much data, taking so much documents out there. What they do is they create vectors of sort of
yeah.
similarity between different words. So basically, the reason they spout out stuff that looks realistic is they've just got enough, as you say, data set that they know that
Right.
those words kind of go together quite nicely. And Michael has put in the chat. Thanks, Michael, for your feedback. The ethical AI for taking the implicit bias out of the models. I think what's coming next from a model perspective, and I've been talking to some contacts of mine on this, is in fact I posted on LinkedIn only a few hours on this, is large language models are great, but they're just one type of AI model.
Right.
The future is multiple AI models. And actually, this is an architecture I talked about many years ago when I was back in Big Four days.
Yeah.
You have an orchestrator in the middle, and actually the orchestrator almost gets as smart as some of the models. So what you have is, it's a bit like the human brain. Like we have a frontal cortex, whatever it is, that sort of controls the rest of the brain functions. You've got something that goes, oh, this sort of question. I think the large language model would be good at answering that.
So we need the prefrontal cortex, is that right? In order to distinguish between threat and friend.
Yeah. And actually, much like you or I, hopefully on this live stream, for example, would perhaps pre-filter what comes out of our mouth. Apologies if we do say anything offensive.
Well, I'm only drinking tea today, so
Okay, well that's good. You're not on the beer, so we've got hope that hopefully things will go okay. But
yeah.
What about part of this orchestrated architecture that also sort of sanity checks before it goes back to the customer? So the large language model at the moment, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever the large language model will throw back at you.
Right.
You might have a dog all of a sudden appear in your generated art.
It's chaos. It's chaos theory. It was just a random dog. Right?
It's a glitch in the matrix.
It is. A glitch.
So I think the large language model is really promising, but what's even more promising is like an aggregated AI model. And here's where it gets really interesting. So lots of people get scared or talk about sort of artificial general intelligence. And I actually think if this is the architectural, this is the direction that artificial and general intelligence will occur, it probably won't actually be that clever. It'll just be an aggregated set of cleverness. And actually, collectively, how clever is that? Well, it's just something that knows to go to this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. And each individual bit on its own is quite clever. But unless we build something that's actually truly kind of interwoven, integrated all the different pieces, no individual bit will have the full context. To your point, it won't have the human level understanding of what it's really doing.
Well, I mean, I can tell by your statement there. I can tell that you do not follow the Singularity subreddit, which I do, which tells me I'm predicting right now that by July of next year, this thing will be sentient and we'll all be dead, sort of like Terminator 2 style, right, kind of thing, like massive nuclear apocalypse.
Unless someone decides to put this technology in front of, I don't know, the armories of all the US military stores or something.
You got to know that they're looking at this, right? I mean, come on, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping someone has built in an anti-Skynet kind of governance layer somewhere. But I mean, I think as I said, I think in our recording on Architect Tomorrow about last year, like AI will probably just go wrong slightly in lots of little annoying places rather than some big horrible dystopian nightmare. That's my thought on this stuff anyway.
Well, but there's the flip side, right? And we can probably wrap this up soon here, but I want to. I mean, there's the chance that it gets things right. Now, I want to share something with you here if I can figure out how to use Restream real quick. Can I share
your screen?
Share screen sharing.
You want me to fill while you
Chrome tab. Yeah, here we go. Okay, because sometimes it could potentially get things right, which I think we can all agree that this AI generated art. I mean, clearly that's me.
Wow.
Which I mean, clearly we can all agree that isn't 100% accurate.
Who's the actor? Who's the Jack Bauer actor? What's he called?
I don't know.
You're giving me Jack Bauer vibes.
I like it. I mean, I always wanted to be an astronaut, so it took AI to get me there. So.
What's hilarious is I've used the Lenser as well, and a lot of people are also talking about Lenser. Perhaps it's interesting on LinkedIn. It's the business social network. People are talking about GPT-3 because it's the business application. Correct. On Instagram, people seem to be talking about Lenser because it's the kind of selfie sort of version of the thing, right? Yeah. And what's interesting is I also had an astronaut picture, and I laughed because it's probably the only astronaut picture with someone in glasses, right? Because of course lots of astronauts wear glasses.
Right.
I think it's pretty sure you have to have pretty good vision, right, to be an astronaut. But yeah, a lot of mine came back completely useless because my glasses just kind of threw the algorithm out. And
Right. Well, but
you know,
that's a great example of where there's a contextual thing there, right? And I think
yeah,
that's an example of something it will learn how to accommodate for that and adapt for it and filter things out. Much like if you use a Google Pixel like I do, right?
yeah,
The capability of it to say, hey, do you just want to take the people out of the background? Yeah, just take the people out of the background, right? I mean, some of those pictures can get very complex as to like, well, what constitutes a person in the background, right? This,
yeah,
that, and the other. I think they've trained that thing pretty well to know how to do that. And I think the same will be true with glasses. But I think to the original point, there's that human context bit that, I know how this information is going to be used. And therefore, I'm the only one that really, with my brain, can select the information that I need. And that's why I need 50 pages of Google results, right? But I do think there are applications for sure, right? I
yeah.
need, like you said, like, if you have I don't want to say her name because she'll start talking to me, right? But in the thing in the background, right? Like, what's the weather going to be? I think these short sort of things. I think that is a practical,
Mm.
immediate, tactical sort of
Yeah,
application of this thing,
yeah,
as well as all of the customer relationship management stuff, right?
yeah.
Um,
Michael makes the point. Actually, iOS does that now. Actually,
yeah, of
the
course.
other one does as well. Weather is probably a bad example because it's fairly
I
data point
know.
driven.
Yeah, that was stupid.
But maybe I'm planning on going to the airport tomorrow at this time. What's the
Yeah.
traffic normally like at
Well,
that sort of
actually,
time of day?
Google does that too, right? Google already
But
does that.
probably not from the sentence I just described, right? It's
Probably
taking
true.
that natural language question and then
Mhm.
turning it into the Google Map sort of results. So I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
I think Michael's right. Some of this stuff is solved in other ways. It's probably more the interesting thing for me is the empathy side. But rather than talking about that, what I wanted to talk about around Lensa is there's a classic darker side of digital type angle to this, right? I don't know if you saw
mhm,
the TechCrunch article that Lensa will very easily create not for safe for work images
right.
with,
I saw
so
that.
you can effectively, without someone's consent, create softcore pornography versions of people
Mhm,
using Lensa, and it's a bit like GPT. You can get round its safe guide rails around racism and things like that by asking it to give you code. So on my Twitter feed, if people go to Cronky, you'll see I've retweeted some of the sort of things that people have done with GPT that actually provides racist responses, but it provides them back as code because it's not got the safeguards to not do that when it returns code rather than English responses.
yeah. And Michael on the link from LinkedIn, I wish I could respond to LinkedIn for whatever reason through the interface I have. I can't. I can only read the LinkedIn comments, but he makes the point. The Netflix AI suggestions. I mean, and well before it, right? Gen one of all of this, right? You think about like Amazon recommendation engines and personalization, all that. And I know that that's changed over the years, but if you go all the way back, and you remember when you first went into Amazon and it said, "Hey, you read this book before, you might like this book." And I get it, that was 20 years ago. I understand, but that was like, wow, holy cow, how does it know that?
But a lot of this is just Bayesian probability stuff, which has been around. Yeah, it's been around for a while.
Right.
It's just, I guess, the maturity of like layering in more compute power or more
Yeah.
data sources or better models, better algorithms. So yeah, the probability stuff. We like to think we're really unique as human beings, but
No, we're
unfortunately,
not. We're
as things like
utterly
Cambridge
predictable.
Analytica showed, we can be profiled and boxed
Oh,
fairly
well, I mean,
easily.
hey, we're sharing all of our data, right? I mean, we're training the model with all of the information. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I guess the question is, right? This, I guess, maybe be the last question because I know we're consuming people's time. Well, they're eating their lunch, or at least in the U.S. Eastern
They
time
might
zone.
be about to have their dinner here in the
Yeah,
UK.
or they're down the pub having a
Down
having
the,
a
yeah, yeah, they're
you know,
probably down the pub. They're not listening to this.
having a
They're being
Tetley's.
drunk.
They'd be having a Tetley's down the pub, right? Whatever. Anyway, so what the hell was I going to say? Yeah. So, like, at what point, as this improves, and I think you can see this could improve dramatically with training. And look, we're training it, we're using it. That's what the hype is about, right? I mean, it's getting
Yeah,
better and better every day because millions of people are using it. So if you fast forward 6 months, right? Are these types of technologies able to create things, let's say text, copy, articles that are indistinguishable from what a human might be able to do? Because I'll be honest with you, some of the AI generated photo stuff, some of them are photorealistic, like even
yeah,
right now,
it's
right?
insane.
Hmm.
And on this, and then I would quickly like to touch on sustainability before we close. On this, one of the other tweets I put out or retweeted was someone says we're changing era because we're moving from a generation where we had the internet almost entirely based on human generated content. We are now moving to an era where we won't know whether the content, the text, has been generated by a human being or it's been generated by a machine. So they're saying like we're in this sort of golden phase, and actually almost we need to kind of go to the archive machine, the archive.org, sort of thing, and
The Wayback,
like
the Wayback machine. Yeah.
freeze and seal that somewhere, because that is the last time that will be true, that it's all human generated. In the future, we won't have any clue whether it's human or machine generated.
That's really, really good point. So, okay, well, that's a very trendy topic. I know.
Yep.
I know. There's another one that is hot on the top of your head, right? You've just done a series of talks on this.
Yeah.
Sustainability. Now, we've talked about sustainability on the main channel. This is not the main channel. This is consultants saying things like extra bits. We don't know what to call it yet. We'll call it something. We'll come up with some
extra bits. We may need to rebrand that.
A better background, something like pretend like we actually put effort into it, right? But but the main channel, as I said, we talk about like evergreen things and I know we talked about sustainability because I think it's an evergreen topic. But I know that there's some sort of like in the moment topical things that you've been working on, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that for a sec? Or?
Yeah, no, just quickly. So I think what I'm trying to do is make sustainability a broader thing that thinks about not just environmental sustainability, but like economic, technical, skills, people. So kind of in the round, because I think there are some people that fully subscribe to climate change. There are others that don't. There are some that are really like money orientated, so the energy cost thing is more of an issue for them. There are some people that are all about people. There are some that are all about purpose. So I think what the key thing for me, and the other thing is, there's way too much one-dimensional thinking. Like, oh, hey, I'm from the risk team. Can you just make sure that your project has this like risk thing sorted? Yeah, thanks. I'm off now. Bye. And then the next thing you know, you've got someone else coming in saying, oh yeah, the accessibility thing. Can you make sure this thing's fully accessible?
Right.
Oh, and security then comes in and says, oh no, you can't do that because it needs to do this and the other. What I'm sort of seeing is actually, if we sort of start to kind of take a broader look at longer term sort of thinking on our projects, particularly when it comes to tech, there are a bunch of things that kind of make sense. So one of the big alignment areas I'm seeing is between security and sustainability. So I won't go into all the ins and outs now. I posted a snippet of the talk.
Well, yeah, people should go read what you posted, and I reposted it also. So
cool. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
We've reached tens of people at this point.
So it's actually one of my most successful posts recently. It's kind of instantly thousands of views, which is great. Because I wanted to get it in front of people, right? Not because I'm an egomaniac. Well, I'm a little bit of an egomaniac, maybe, but it's more that this stuff needs to be thought about more. We need to be thinking about this stuff holistically, and also.
And by the way, I particularly like how you did in your Venn diagram, right, as part of your presentation, how you laid out that look, this is not just about one thing, right? It's not just about reducing energy costs or reducing energy usage or the carbon footprint or offsets or whatever, right? It is, and I think we touched on this, I think in the episode we did about sustainability. It's about the sustainability of the enterprise, right? And that has to do with, yes, the energy footprint, but also other things, right?
I guess in a way, it's kind of repositioning enterprise architecture. Right?
Yeah.
And we spoke earlier in the year, if we look back to January, we were kind of talking on the Mashup sort of podcast. We did, almost, where is enterprise architecture now? What's the deal? Some people are claiming it's gone, and I need to be careful because Chris Potts might be listening and he might tell me off for using the wrong words. Enterprise architecture. Hey, Chris, if you are watching,
if he is,
we're big fans of yours. But he's right to kind of correct me on some things because I am a bit clumsy with my wording sometimes. But I guess the point is that EA sometimes struggles to sort of show its value. So kind of bringing it back to the ongoing viability and sustainability of your organization.
Right.
And by the way, within that is environment, within that is financial, within that is skills and technical debt and all these other things, and security. So what I'm trying to do is, I guess, provide a framework. It's not a silver bullet. It's a framework for thinking differently, essentially. And so, if people are interested, go and check out the post on Chris or mine.
Definitely do it. And we'll put the link, if we were prepared, we could like flash the link up, but it's live. And this is the first time really, I guess this is the second time we've used this tool, right? But
third time lucky. We'll know how to use it.
We'll know how to use it, on Monday when we record with a world-renowned top social media expert. I'm sure nothing will go wrong when we do that.
It never does. It never does.
It never does.
We never have any content for the cold open.
No. There's definitely not 3 hours of footage of nonsense for every 30 minutes that ends up in an episode. Yeah. But so yeah, so I think that's great. Sustainability. We talked about OpenAI. Just a couple of plugs for the main channel, which is not this. This is not the main. The CST Consultants Saying Things.com, or the YouTube channel, I think, is Consultants Saying Things. What's all Consultants Saying Things? We got a couple topics coming out, right? So we're going to be talking to top. I mean, he's top, right? Social media expert globally, about how consultants can leverage, right, some of the social media, in particular LinkedIn. Look, things are a little unsettled economically. There's a lot of layoffs. What is 2023 going to look like? Might be time to brush up on, hey, is your LinkedIn profile up to date, right?
Yep.
All those sorts of things. How to do that. So that's going to be great. I know we've also queued up. I don't know if we're going to get them all in December, but we've queued up stuff around like side gigs. We want to talk about some leadership things. I think there's a lot of great stuff going into what will be season 6 of this podcast. Which, by the way, I think I would be remiss if I did not mention that it's a top 15 podcast of all topics in Ecuador.
Wow.
I mean,
hats off to Ecuador.
Look at what we've achieved.
Given you've plugged CST, and this is also going out on Architect tomorrow, potentially live on YouTube. So
yeah, sure. It
thank
says
you
there in the corner. It says
thank you if anyone is tuned in from the Architect Tomorrow subscriber base. Hello. So yeah, Architect Tomorrow is a channel that's more about sort of technology, strategy, and architecture types, or people that are interested in that sort of stuff. So we talk about a whole range of things. I'm not quite as structured and formal as Chris. The frequency of the episodes is a bit all over the place. Hopefully it's interesting and useful to people.
That is the first time anyone has said that I'm structured or formal. I think that's great. I'm going to write that down.
There you go.
Date. Yeah.
So, and with that, I guess we've been running for about half an hour, and people are probably now going out of their minds.
They're done.
They're down the pub already.
They're down the pub, having a bubbly, whatever. Yeah. But I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I think you've crossed purposes there. Like, bubbly is champagne.
I know.
Having a so yeah, but they might be having a glass of champagne or prosecco, or bubble and squeak. They might be eating bubble and squeak for dinner, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
Bangers and mash.
Yeah. But still, is that like hot dogs and potatoes? What is that? What is bangers and mash?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, you've got to drop, and we should go as well. Yeah. But thanks.
I've got a 12 too. That I'm a few minutes late for. So listen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Oliver Cron, Chris Lockhart. Tune into the main Consultants Saying Things channel. Watch us when we release our podcast. You can also listen to it on all the platforms everywhere, provided by the audio streams. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Oliver. How do I end this?